The goal of Data Transformers podcast is to accelerate digital transformation by bridging the gap between business outcomes and rapidly advancing technologies. And we aim to bridge this gap by focusing on data. I am Peggy Tsai, top 50 women in tech influencer, co-author of the AI book, and data governance expert.
I'm Ramesh Danta, an entrepreneur, a tech blogger, and AI enthusiast.
For those of you who have already listened to a few episodes of Data Transformers, we're really trying to highlight people and technology, but the basis of all this is data. And I'm so happy to have with us today a colleague and a friend that actually met at a data conference, Phl Bangayan, who now is a principal data scientist at Teradata.
Thank you. And glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Phil, what I really thought was interesting about your career and kind of what you started.
Sure, absolutely. So actually, I'm going to start off by going back to college.
That's way back.
Yeah, way back. So I did my undergraduate and graduate degrees in electrical engineering at UCLA. And upon graduating at UCLA, I figured there were only two places I ever wanted to work. One was NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, because who wouldn't want to land a spacecraft on Mars? And the other was Walt Disney Imagineering, because who wouldn't want to design theme park rides for a living? And so when I graduated, I went over to NASA Jet Propulsion Lab and had a great time there. And then from there, I went to another engineering firm called Rockwell, and I was a very happy engineer until one day, one of my managers tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to help write grant proposals. And so we won grant proposals. We won $250,000, and then we wrote a grant proposal for a $25 million grant.
Wait, did you say 25 million?
Yes, we were writing a $25 million grant proposal, and we wrote that, but we didn't get it. And it was at that time that I realized that in graduate school, they taught me how to write good code. They taught me how to design good circuits, but they never taught me how to beg for money. That just wasn't part of the engineering curriculum.
That's right.
And so at that point, I realized, I really enjoy bring money into the company. And if I want to go ahead and do this as a living, I want to learn the foundations about how do you write grant proposals or business plans. And so I went off to business school. And so I did a two-year full-time MBA at MIT Sloan. And then when I was in school in Boston, I saw this white stuff falling from the sky, something that, Peggy, since you live in New York, I know you're familiar with. But for me, being a Californian, I saw this and I said, well, this isn't really what I really want to deal with.
Wait, you don't like snow or hail? I'm kidding.
No, not at all. And so it was at that point in my first winter that I said, okay, let me go back to what it is that I want to do. And oh yeah, Disney. How about going to Disney? And so when I graduated, I applied to Disney. And I ended up with a finance role at Disneyland Resort, which is the theme park in Anaheim. And when I was there, I wrote the business plan for Mickey's Trick or Treat Party. And then I was a very happy person in finance until one day someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, we'd like you to take on a marketing role at Disneyland. And I said, well, I wasn't really expecting to take a marketing role. And in fact, when I was in business school, I only had 2 marketing classes, one of which was required. And they said, well, we've seen the work that you do, and we actually think that you would be really good for this role. In fact, one of the main projects going on right now is a monthly payment program. And it's involving our annual pass group, which is the group we want you to lead. And involves a lot of interaction with finance because essentially financing a monthly payment program is a finance program, involves a lot of IT. And we think it'll be helpful to have someone in marketing who understands those roles. You're right now in finance, you are an engineer. So we think you'd be really great for this role.
Wow.
And so I took on that marketing role. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having a business within a business and having these levers in order to grow that business. Go ahead, Peggy.
I was going to ask you, did you have any fears or hesitations by taking on a marketing role just because it was so different from what you were doing in the past, or you didn't have any prior experience?
Absolutely. Disney has world-class marketers. And in fact, I could draw 3 circles on a board and you would automatically know it's Mickey
No,
Mouse.
Mickey Mouse is
So,
yours.
and people have been wearing Mickey Mouse outfits ever since they came right out of the womb. They were wearing Mickey Mouse diapers. So it's an iconic brand. And so, yes, I actually had fears about it, but it was one of those roles where they told me, we feel we can teach you the marketing. We really need someone who understands other parts of the business to come in and manage this project. And I'd worked in my finance role, I'd worked with the marketing people enough that I knew them and they knew me. And so there was that level of comfort. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's absolute fear in that, wow, this is an iconic brand, and here I am in the marketing department when I wasn't necessarily a marketing major coming through. So I did marketing at Disney and grew that business. And then I took on a similar role at NBC Universal. And in fact, we doubled
So
that.
Phil, sorry
Yeah.
for interrupting, but the NBC Universal, was it your choice? You wanted to switch over, or is it an opportunity that came your way?
It's an opportunity that came my way.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity for growth, and it was a director level position, so I'd be an executive at NBC Universal.
I see.
And so I came in and we grew that business. We doubled that business from 2011 when I started to 2016. And in that process, I used a lot of the analytic background that I had in order to grow that business. It was really about using data, and by data I mean data points, in order to make better decisions. And so throughout that process, as we're growing this business, there was a part of me that said, that's great. We're making really good analytic decisions. And then we decided, well, why are we limiting this to just one line of business? I went to them, I said, I'd like to go ahead and explore this further. And so that's when we created this marketing data science analytics project department. And so we're applying analytics throughout all of marketing, throughout the different lines of business. And Peggy, that's when you and I met, when I was heading up that department.
So Phil, a question: when you were doing that lot of analytics in that, did you have a educational background in analytics? Did you take some courses, or were you learning on the job itself?
Yeah, that's a really great question. A lot of it was based on my engineering and my finance work. So it was applying a lot of finance to marketing. It was applying a lot of, in fact, a lot of times when you're looking at strategic roles in marketing, they're always based on some data point. So you take different data points, you connect the dots together, and then you figure out what that larger story is. And so a lot of it was taking a look at data. It could have been, for example, from market research. It could have been from different sales data, or it could have been from, let's say, website data. So a lot of it was having that analytic mindset. But along the way, between 2011 and 2016, MOOCs started coming about. And so you got companies such as edX and Udacity and Coursera coming on board. And those were particularly interest to me. And so I started going ahead and taking some of those courses. In fact, I started taking.
So Phil, sorry, I think it is so fascinating story. We'll keep interrupting you with questions. So you talked about this MOOCs that were coming around. I mean, was it your initiative that you went and looked at, or was somebody guiding you, somebody mentoring you? Or you should look at it in the area. So if you could talk about how that happened.
Sure. So the first MOOC that I remember coming out was one called AIClass.com. It was taught by Stanford, or one of the professors at Stanford, and it made its rounds through the various boards, or I think I found out about it on Facebook, if nowhere else. I said, wow, that's really interesting. I never took an artificial intelligence class when I was an undergrad. Wouldn't it be nice to go ahead and sit in one of those? Well, I tried to sit in it, tried to sit on it. It was a little too fast paced for me. And in fact, I think they found out that only about 4% of the people who actually started a MOOC ended up finishing it. But it really piqued my curiosity. And it really made me say, wow, that's, I'm glad I got a chance to do that, because who gets a chance to take all the courses that you wanted to in college? There's a limited amount of time. You're in school to get out of school. You certainly can't take everything you want to. And moreover, a lot of things change over time. So even if I had taken an artificial intelligence course when I was an undergrad, the one that they offered in, let's say, 2010 or whenever it was that AIclass.com came out, would have been different.
And it's probably different today in 2020 than 10 years ago. I mean, I love, Phil, how you've always had such an open mind for learning and transforming yourself. Could you share any other tips that you learned along the way to become more in the data science and analytics field?
Sure. Actually, one thing I want to point out here was that it was actually my wife who noticed that I was really enjoying this. I mean, I was looking at various courses, and it wasn't until I took a course called the Analytics Edge. It was actually the first course that I paid to take. So this is a great course. It's taught by professors at MIT Sloan, and it's meant for business school students. And I saw the curriculum. I said, that sounds interesting. How do you go ahead and apply analytics in order to grow businesses? Something that I care about. And I went ahead and I took it. And as I was taking that, my wife noticed, you're really enjoying this. Like, you are enjoying this more than you are talking about messaging or talking about positioning, which are classic things you need to do in marketing. And those are things that I was doing for about a decade or so. And she said, if you're this interested in it, you might want to take a look a little bit further in this and explore that further, and maybe see if there is a way that you can apply this in your work. And sure enough, as I learned more techniques through that course, I started applying that at work, and I started being able to solve some problems that we had before. I just didn't know how to solve them. Or if I knew how to solve them, it might have been inefficient, and there were new, more advanced ways of doing it. And so my advice is, listen to people who know you well, because they may see something in you that you may not even notice.
Yeah, Phil, that's a great question. Just to follow up on Peggy's question, you have, one of the challenges people have in the industries, there's so much information, right? There are so many courses, so many people offering. How should one go about evaluating what's out there, and then which ones are the best? I mean, go with the highest reviews, ratings, or do you have any suggestions in that space?
It's completely personal. Anytime I meet someone who's looking at getting into data science and I tell them how I did it, I always tell them it's my story. It's a personal journey. What worked for me may not work for you. So for me, I gravitated more towards university offered courses. So as I mentioned, Coursera and edX, those are courses that are taught by university professors for the most part. I know people who could do equally as well going to a boot camp. A boot camp wouldn't have worked for me because I, at the time, and in fact still am, executive at a Fortune 500 company, family, a lot of pressure when you're running a big line of business.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't have been able to make those evening classes because normally I was at work at the time, or if the class was being held on the weekend. Well, I actually, I was already missing a lot of time with the kids, and it wouldn't be fair to my wife to miss yet another day. So I didn't want to do that. So for me, what worked was taking these online courses and creating my own curriculum around it. But I can equally see someone say, hey, I need a little bit more structure. I'm going to do one of these boot camps. Or I can see someone saying, I need more interactivity and I'm looking to go ahead and listen to lectures, and maybe I'll go ahead and do data camp. Or maybe someone saying, I want something that's a little bit more practical or has a lot more variety, and maybe I'll go ahead and do Udemy. And all those are valid. All I can say is I chose one that worked for me.
So definitely very, very customized for yourself and your personal situation. I mean, so continue on with your career progression. I mean, so at NBC, you were already, your last role at NBC, you were already moving into data science and analytics. And how did you make the full jump though to where you are now, which is principal data scientist at Teradata?
Well, they came looking for me. So it's another one of those situations where sometimes you just don't even know if you're going to be good in a role. And so when the recruiter reached out to me, he was actually looking for me to head up a consulting group. And I said, well, that's interesting because I don't have a consulting background. So why are you coming to me?
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's another example where you were completely moved out of your comfort zone.
I know. I would never have thought of going into a consulting role.
Yeah.
But he said that what they were looking for was someone who was technical enough and could help grow a team and could grow a business and can communicate with high-level executives. And so when I was at NBC Universal, I was reporting to the chief marketing officer, at least I was at one point in time. Mm-hmm. I had monthly updates with the president. I had been in marketing and in finance, so I could communicate with both CMOs and CFOs. And I was managing teams up to 9 people. And in fact, I had three direct reports who had won Employee of the Year out of a group of 150. So I really love the idea of mentoring and helping people in their career, and helping people grow and succeed. And those were all elements that they were looking for, particularly the communicating to clients part. And so even though I did not have a consulting background, it actually ended up being a really good fit.
Here, a common theme, especially among other data and technologists, that communication continues to be the key here. I mean, Phil, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on why communication is still the utmost quality in a lot of candidates and in a lot of employees.
So one of my favorite lines, which I used to tell my analysts all the time, is it doesn't matter how sophisticated your model is if no one understands it. And one of my pet peeves is when you do about 99% of the work and then the work goes to waste because someone doesn't agree with you or because you forget to do that final part, which a lot of time is communicating it. And so I don't believe that every data scientist has to be the best communicator, but I do believe that there has to be someone on the team who can take some analytic analysis and distill it to a point where an executive, like a CMO or a CFO or president, who doesn't understand it, can say, okay, what does this mean for me? The so what? And in fact, it's one of those lessons that unfortunately I learned the hard way because there were times when I had really great analytic teams, but I didn't go that extra route in order to connect the dots and help my bosses, namely the C-level executives, understand how that work would help grow a business, or how that work would help transform a strategy, or how we could go ahead and use that to our advantage.
Previously, we were talking to other people that talking about the storytelling aspect of data science is extremely important. I think you're emphasizing that point.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, storytelling can mean a lot of different things. It really depends on what your situation is, and by that I mean, if you're a B2B company, what's your client looking for, or if you're an internal data science team, how do you go ahead and take that analysis and distill it to a point where someone understands not necessarily what is you do, but how the work that you do can help them achieve their goals.
So Phil, continuing with this, the theme of the transition. So now you're at Teradata and the principal data scientist. You're dealing on a day-to-day basis with in data science, you're steeped in data science, PhDs in data science, probably multiple PhDs in data science. And then
Mm-hmm.
you're coming from a MBA background. Of course, undergraduate engineering is still technical. So how is it like? Is there a tension when a PhD deals with a non-PhD? Can you talk a little bit about the coexistence of this different skilled people within the data science kind of a team?
Sure. And in fact, I think one of the areas that I'm sensing here is that there might be some competition, and that's the last thing I want.
Mm.
And one of the pieces of advice that I give anyone looking to get into data science is define who you are, and don't go off and compete against people who are more qualified than you. So, for example, when I was going from marketing into data science, I knew that I did not want to compete against a 28-year-old with a PhD in statistics. That person can write better code than me, understand, can do better proofs than me, and not a good competition. However, I bring a lot of experiences that someone who's in that situation might not. So I've grown businesses in finance and marketing. I've managed multiple people. I've helped people in their careers and I've helped them win awards. And these are all different skills that I can go ahead and bring, which are very complementary to someone who has that PhD in statistics or data science or engineering or whatever it may be. In fact, I was just on a project where I had somebody who wrote some incredible code to go ahead and demonstrate to our clients how to go ahead and do supervised learning. I let him do all of the coding work. And of course, I had to go in and do some code myself because I need to go ahead and do two of the four sessions. But I let him put most of the work together, and then I handled most of the communications and I handled most of the deck writing because that's where I excel, and that's actually the part that he didn't enjoy at all. So we complement each other pretty well.
I love that story, Phil. I mean, it's really, you're playing to your strengths, right? And your experience, and really bringing to the table a different facet to data scientists that, the fresh undergrad does not have yet, right? In terms of your broad experience and working with the C-suite executives already.
Do you remember the early 2000s when everyone was going to fiber?
Yeah.
And there was a problem which we call the last mile problem.
Yeah.
That's the key that I play. So if someone brings it 90% of the way through, I can help with that 10% and close the deal. Or I can go ahead and make that work actionable so that so it doesn't go to waste. And no one wants to see their hard work go to waste, right? I mean, so we all play a part. In fact, it's one of my leadership pillars. I always tell my team that everyone plays a part. It's very easy when you're the data scientist to be able to say, well, hold it, I've got the hardest part here because no one can do what I do. And that could be absolutely true, but everyone plays some other part in there. And it may be a part that you may not be as good at, or it may be a part that eats up some of your time, or it may be just a part that you just flat out don't want to do. So be appreciative of the part that everyone else on the team plays.
That's great advice. I mean, I think for anyone in whatever time they are, point in their career, that's great advice.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard today and would like to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite player like iTunes and Spotify. And please do rate our podcast. Also, please go to our website, www.datatransformerspodcast.com for more episodes, blogs, and information on our speakers. Thank you.